Okay. I want you to imagine that you wake up tomorrow and open your phone and you get a news update. Donald Trump and Congress have declared war on Iran over the impediment of free commerce in the Strait of Hormuz and have approved for the draft to be initiated immediately. This would surely affect everyone in this classroom in some way, maybe even you directly. It is required by law that every male must register for selective service within 30 days of their 18th birthday, subjecting them to military conscription, also known as the draft. The 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution provides that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Involuntary servitude, involuntary conscription, kind of the same thing. According to the Funk and Wagnall's New World Encyclopedia's definition of civil rights and liberties, as Americans, we believe that all human beings should have inalienable rights and liberties that cannot justly be violated by others or by the state. In an article by Anthony Gregory, a former policy advisor for the Future of Freedom Foundation, argues, compelling a person to work for the state is involuntary servitude. Forcing a person to fight, kill, and possibly die in a war, and threatening a resistor with imprisonment and deserters with death, one may argue is an immoral brand of enslavement. That means that every time the draft has been implemented for the Civil War to the Vietnam War, has stood in violation of the 13th Amendment. Gregory goes on to argue, the Constitution in its current language leaves little room for interpretation of its prohibition of involuntary servitude. Conscription is a brand of slavery, and if it returns, any arguments over whether America is a free country become obsolete. No nation is free when its government seizes labor from its young. A nation that utilizes conscription in the name of freedom suffers under the most perverse of absurdities, for to the extent that young people can be forced to fight, there is no free society left to defend. Is there need for a draft today? The requirement for military conscription is less now than ever before. A draft is not essential in today's warfare. A Washington Post article by Christopher Preble, former naval officer and vice president for Defense and Foreign Policy Studies, talks about how American wars since the last draft in 1973 have been fought by far smaller forces, and our mixed track record in those conflicts is not due to the lack of troops, rather the inability to achieve decisive victory in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. According to James Carfano, a West Point graduate and leading expert in national security and foreign policy challenges, President Johnson could have generated the same levels of combat power by deploying National Guard forces during the Vietnam War. His decision to rely on the draft was not based on military necessity, but on the political culture at the time. President Johnson wrongfully assumed that the public would find the draft less disruptive than a Guard mobilization. Preble argues a draft would likely reduce the military's fighting effectiveness. Today's force is uniquely capable precisely because it is comprised entirely of volunteers, men and women who've chosen to join the military for a variety of reasons, including the desire to serve their country. People who volunteer for the military are more likely to stay in, and over time, they receive more training. Draftees are more likely to get out once their obligation is expired, thus receiving less training. So a conscripted military might be larger, but it wouldn't be better. In an article written by Dr. Ignacio Flores, a retired lieutenant commander of the U.S. Navy, states that a strong argument for discontinuing conscription is that technological development in warfighting has reduced the necessity for maintaining large standing forces. For instance, how does a large standing army have any significance in the case of thermonuclear war? Just ask yourself that. What would be done in place of the selective service system? Carafano suggests Congress might consider an alternative form of service, a path that allows individuals to voluntarily join an inactive reserve. Such a reserve would provide the services with an additional pool of manpower without relying on compulsory military service. What would America look like without the selective service system? Relish in the fact that you currently aren't being sent off to war against your will, without cause, moral obligation, or voluntary conscription. And in a second, all of that could change. A war could pop off in the Middle East, and you or someone you know would be sent into harm's way. The debate over the selective service system topic should be looked at closely and lean in the direction of our current interests of Americans, keeping their civil liberties alive.